Well, joining me now from London is Chris Williamson. He's the Labour Party MP for Derby North. And in Chicago, we have the former Labour Party policy advisor, Azeem Ibrahim. He's now a research professor at the US Army Strategic Studies Institute. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Chris, let me start with you. So for many of these rebels, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party was too anti-Semitic, or it was too equivocal on Brexit, or both. Could they be right?
No, they're not. And these are 11 individuals who've never supported Jeremy Corbyn, never supported the new direction that the Labour Party's taken now since Jeremy became the leader. I think the truth is that Labour Party members, indeed the country as a whole, had become very tired and dissatisfied with the policy agenda that successive governments had pursued, both New Labour and indeed Conservative governments. Really what we've been living with is a sort of market economics, sort of neoliberal economic agenda ever since Margaret Thatcher was elected in 1979. And I think there was a real appetite for a change of direction. And the truth is now that the Labour Party's policy programme is supported by between 70 and 80% of the general public, whether that be public ownership or scrapping tuition fees, building council houses, having an economy that works in the interests of everybody, secure employment for people again, and making sure that our public services are fit for purpose. Regrettably, over the last 4 decades, we've seen public services used as a cash cow to generate profits for the private sector. And I just think people have had enough. And that's why it was such a breath of fresh air when Jeremy Corbyn was elected. And sadly, some MPs, these 8 who've left the Labour Party, were just never really comfortable with that different direction, and they've made an honourable decision, I guess, if they don't feel that they are in step with the Labour Party members or indeed the country as a whole. They've made the right decision in moving on.
Azeem, is that a fair analysis of what's happened?
Well, it's very telling that this independent group has only been formed last week, and they're already polling at 18%. In comparison to the Labour Party's 23%. So they are actually within 5 points within Labour within 1 week. And this is an entity that is not a political party. It does not have a manifesto. It does not have any policies at all. And the fact that they're polling so well has significantly rattled the Labour Party, which is why they've called this people's vote within the last 24 hours. I don't accept Chris Williamson's analysis of Jeremy Corbyn being extremely popular. I think some of the individual policies of Labour are very popular within the public, but Jeremy Corbyn himself is polling at the lowest rate of any opposition leader ever at this stage.
So Azeem, what we're hearing from Chris is that essentially these people who broke away were not Corbyn fans to begin with. It's not as if they were betrayed somewhere along the way. They never liked him from the beginning. They never wanted him. And they're not true Labour, in his opinion. They're more centrists, and so good riddance. That sounds roundabout accurate, isn't it?
It's not up to Chris to decide who is true Labour and who is not. Certainly, Jeremy Corbyn comes from a very different wing of the Labour Party, and these individuals were never comfortable with his leadership, as was the case with the majority of the parliamentarians. And I think what Jeremy Corbyn has done now in calling this people's vote is that he probably realised that the hemorrhaging MPs are very fast rate, and there's probably rumours of a significant number more that are willing to join, particularly as the independent group, as it's called, was gaining so much traction within the public domain.
Chris, the fact that Corbyn has called for a second referendum for the first time shows that these guys breaking away has had an impact. They've dragged Corbyn to make a decision. That's a fact, isn't it?
No, it's not really. And I think it's important as well not to reduce politics to personalities. It's not about Jeremy Corbyn. It's about the policy direction that the Labour Party has taken now. And as I've already said, they are very, very popular policies and say overwhelmingly backed by the British people. As far as the decision that was taken...
I think that's Jeremy Corbyn calling you right now.
No, it's not,
carry on.
No, it's my constituents or something. But no. As far as the decision to consider a people's vote now, I mean, this was always on the cards. And indeed, when it was being rumoured that some people were considering leaving the party, I mean, people like the Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell and others were saying on the media, why are they leaving? I mean, what's the issue? I mean, we're very clear in terms of the policy that we adopted at the Labour Party conference. We said that we wanted to try to ensure that any deal met with the 6 tests that the Labour Party set based upon the commitments that were given by the Conservative government. And if that wasn't successful, to then try to secure a general election. And the very last step was to look at possibly calling for another referendum. So this was something that was agreed by the party last September at our conference. So, to suggest that somehow these 8 individuals who decided to move on because they're out of step with the British people and Labour Party members have somehow forced Jeremy Corbyn's hand is absurd.
OK, so Azeem, the vast majority came from Labour. The genesis was in Labour and people being disgruntled over alleged anti-Semitism and other issues. But we've also got Tories joining them now. So when we look at it and we place it in the context of Theresa May's negotiations with the EU, all those votes that had happened in Parliament, has this contributed to the chaos, or is this healthy for UK democracy?
Well, the idea that this was on the cards in the Labour Party from the beginning is certainly not true. Jeremy Corbyn has been forced into this position by the breakaway members of Parliament, gaining considerable traction. The reality is that Jeremy Corbyn has been the most vociferous anti-European Labour MP that there was. He has voted against the European Union for the last 30 years. In fact, when the vote result came in, there was only 2 politicians in the UK that called for an immediate implementation of Article 50. That was Nigel Farage and Jeremy Corbyn. And he is on record in saying that the European Union is a Frankenstein project from which the UK will be much better off withdrawing. So he's been forced into this position because of these members of Parliament that are breaking off and gaining this kind of popularity amongst the public. Whether it's good for the public domain, for public politics in general, I always believe that debate and a wide variety of debate is always healthy for democracy. Jeremy Corbyn is an individual who these people could simply not see being Prime Minister. They believe that he was a threat to the national security of the United Kingdom, considering his past support of organisations and entities which they find alien to their own beliefs. So it's not just about anti-Semitism or Brexit. It is about Jeremy Corbyn himself. And as many of them said, they simply cannot go back to their own constituents and ask them to vote to put Jeremy Corbyn into Downing Street. This is something that they simply find completely untenable.
Well, that generated the question, Chris. How do your constituents feel? Do they see this breakaway as somehow weakening the party? Are they worried? Do they see it as a threat?
No, I mean, I think they're an irrelevance. And, don't read too much in these early opinion polls. I mean, let's remember when the Social Democratic Party was founded by much more significant figures than the lightweights that have left the Labour Party. I mean, they reached, I think, around 50% in the opinion polls, but they disappeared without trace at the next election. And that's basically this organisation, this so-called independent group's got a shelf life until the next election. And in relation to the European Union, I mean, yes, Jeremy's got his criticisms. I've got my criticisms. It's far from a perfect institution. And indeed, our campaign in the EU referendum was to remain and reform the European Union. And it's interesting that MPs described, not necessarily Jeremy's allies either, but they described him as having the energy of a 25-year-old in the referendum campaign. He addressed more meetings than any other politician and threw himself into that campaign and made a very honest pitch. And look, around 65%, I think it was, of Labour supporters actually supported remaining in the European Union. That is the sort of remain and reform agenda that Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party was putting forward. And, the enemies of Jeremy, of course, said, well, this was some catastrophic failure on his part. And yet Nicola Sturgeon, who's the leader of the Scottish National Party, achieved a similar percentage of the SNP supporters who voted Remain, and she was hailed as a hero. So, these arguments are bogus that they put forward about Jeremy Corbyn. He put forward an honest campaign in relation to the European Union. As I say, it was a sensible one. It was one that did resonate with people. It did turn a lot of people who were going to vote to leave in favour of voting Remain. But we are where we are now. And, as I've said, Jeremy is a very popular figure within the Labour Party. Labour's got more members now, I think, than any other political party in Western Europe. We're incredibly great success story thanks to Jeremy Corbyn. And, I think a lot of the grassroots members, if, a few malcontent MPs don't recognise that fact, the vast majority of Labour Party grassroots members do.
Azeem?
Well, I agree with Chris, is that we simply do not know what the shelf life of this independent group will be. At the moment, they have no leader, they have no manifesto, they have no policies. And the reality is that the British electoral system of first past the post does not favour these kinds of new entities emerging. If we had a system of proportional representation, then certainly, they could have some kind of traction and turn that into some sort of results. But at the moment, we just do not know what to expect from them. It seems that it's more of an insurgency, and much of it will depend on how much more of other members of parliament from both the parties, the major parties that they will attract. Will they develop into an official political party? Will they make some sort of deal with some of the other parties like the Liberal Democrats or even possibly the SNP? There's so many unknowns at the moment that we just don't know which direction this may actually all go in.
Well, since the middle of 2016, UK politics has certainly not been boring, that's for sure. Chris and Azeem, I've got to move on, but I thank you both for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Looking forward to having you back on the show.